When was the first? What was the first time that you thought about Crowdbase? Was it a year ago, 2 years ago, 2 years ago?
It was more than 2 years ago. It was summer 2020, and I was working on a tender offer for the Cyprus equity fund, which is finally going to happen supposedly by the end of this year. So we should be hearing about that quite soon. So through my work on that project, I saw this huge funding gap we have here in Cyprus. We didn't have public markets. We don't have angel investors. We didn't have VCs back then. Now there is a few of them popping up, but the combination of these factors restricted the growth of innovative companies and new companies. So I thought if we bring crowdfunding in Cyprus, which you can see the success of it in the US, UK, and Israel, then we could possibly solve this problem.
And what was the how did this initiate it with the government? Was that a suggestion of the group, or they just decided to?
So surprisingly for Cyprus, we had a crowdfunding directive from the regulator before many other European countries. And I think the reason they did it was to incentivize this alternative source of financing. It's just nobody actually went up and followed through to get the license and do it until we did it.
Until you did
Yeah.
it. Interesting. So I have the second question up on Slido. And the question is, rank the topics that you're interested in. These are the 3 topics that we're going to be talking about today. First one is crowdfunding in Cyprus, as we asked a couple of questions here. The second one is raising funds at startups. And the second one is actually investing in startups as investors, right? So whatever topic that ranks higher, we'll get started by that, and then we'll go through that. So please go ahead and rank it, and I'll wait until 6 people. Last question at 6.
I'm guessing because most people have a startup or are working for a startup, probably that will be the most popular.
Raising funds at startups.
Okay. Yes. Investing is also interesting, but I'm guessing not a lot of people will be.
I think I put that section just for me.
It's okay. We can talk about that too at the very end.
You're right. So raising funds at startup, crowdfunding in Cyprus. Then we talk about this.
Correct.
So, I was prepared for the crowdfunding. Now I have to transition.
Yeah.
There is one common question when you have a startup is to actually, do you even need to raise funds, right? Do all startups need to raise funds? Because lots of the founders, especially the first times startup founders, they think that they need to quickly raise funds and through that build a company, but there are other founders that do bootstrapping. What do you think about that situation? Do all startups need investment?
I think the short answer to that is yes. One way or another, you will eventually need investment if you want to go big and achieve something significant. There are a few business models that allow you to bootstrap your business and even grow substantially, but that's a very small niche, usually digital companies. Even though a lot of these founders might be scared about being diluted and losing some control over their business, at the end of the day, a 10% or 10% is quite low, a 20% stake in a multi-million company is worth much more than 100% stake in a company that's worth a few thousand. So if that's your goal to grow and scale the business, then yeah, you're probably gonna need something.
So it really depends on the stage of the startup.
Yeah.
What about ideation stage, like initial stage of the startup? Do they need funding from the beginning, or there's a sweet spot of the stage that?
Yeah, the timing is very important, and a lot of people are maybe too eager to go out there and raise money, and in order maybe to avoid losing their own money. But if you don't invest your own effort, resources into your own idea, then it's likely that nobody else will. They won't be as excited to get on board. So the timing is very important, not to do it too early, because if you do it too early, then you're giving up a much bigger piece of your company for something that you might not even need. So if you have money sitting in the bank just because you can raise money early, that's not useful for the company. So you need to raise the money at the right time. Okay.
And let's say you get to a spot that you've done your projections, you've done your calculations, and you believe that you need funding for your project. How do you evaluate your own startup, and how do you create, let's say, an equity offer to an investor? How do you put a value on your startup?
That's quite hard to do. Very hard. When it's one of the biggest points of friction between us and many of the startups that are approached, because obviously we all want to have multi-million euro businesses, but the reality is that we're a small ecosystem, we're a small market, so you need to start small. How you put the value in it, that really depends on how much you have already inputted yourself. So if you've been working on this business and this idea for the past 2-3 years, you've invested some money yourself and you managed to achieve a decent MVP or even have some market traction, then it's much more likely you can push, you can make those projections much more reasonable and much more and supported by your track record. So you can ask for a higher valuation. Now, if it's just the ideation phase, that would depend a lot to who you're trying to approach for that funding. It can vary a lot on a case by case, because somebody might love your idea and give you whatever you're asking for. But if somebody is a bit hesitant and or they can see the cracks in your story or your business plan, then they can really negotiate you down.
Let's say, let's go with an example. Let's say a startup comes to you and says, my startup is valued 1 million euros, right? What do you as Crowdbase look for? What factors do you look for in order to put a value on that startup to start the negotiation?
Yeah, I would say it's 3 things usually. We want a business plan, the financial projections that go hand in hand, the two of them, how this business plan will work out and how these numbers will look in the future, and then it's the team. So for us, although we don't just want people that have already succeeded or have already had one startup in the past, that's a huge plus, because it's somebody that has already went through this journey and they're already aware of the challenges they're gonna face. They are aware of the ecosystem, so that makes us a lot more comfortable to accept in some ways their valuation. But of course, we always do our own analysis in order to cross-reference what they're asking for and make sure that it makes sense.
I'm sure that analysis that you're talking about is confidential to your platform and system. But let's go with this example, because I wanna help the startup founders to kind of like create not some sort of like a checklist in their mind of what to look for and how much value to put on each factor, each item. All right. Let's say I just pitched you one idea very fast and I'm at the ideation stage. In your head right now, in less than 2 minutes, what keywords in my pitch are you looking for? What are the things that give startups value?
Yeah, the biggest one is the team, and why is this idea the best one for your team to execute? That's the bigger driver, and usually what most people get wrong. You can have a team of friends, they sit around and they brainstorm some great ideas, but their own skill set might not be complementary to what they want to make, which will eventually be a problem for the startup. They will need to hire new people or bring new people on board, and then it quickly dilutes your stake in the business, or you have huge expenses right off the bat, so it wouldn't work.
Yeah, it's much easier to evaluate post revenue, because you can just put the numbers.
Yeah.
These emphases that my questions were pre-revenue to kind of, because sometimes you get some cases of some founders evaluating the startup like 5 million. They haven't made any, and you're like, maybe look into that.
Yeah.
Maybe look at this part of the startup, or maybe this is the value. Okay, so one of the biggest hassles when I was a startup founder back in time, ideation stages and all that is, and this hassle through fundraising is not hearing back from the investors, right? you found 5 or 6 investors in your network, and you send your business plan, you send your projection, you send your pitch, everything. They're like, yes, we're gonna contact you later. Never happens. What do you think that happens, and what can we do about it? What can founders do?
That's a hard one. So if they didn't contact you back, they probably saw something they didn't like, obviously. How can you go about fixing that? Is probably trying to get some feedback and seeing from other investors or some mentors what perhaps have puts them off. This is something that you can usually get some great feedback from competitions or accelerators or incubators, where the already successful angel investors or investors in general can give you feedback on your pitch deck, on your business plan, and what might not be working, or what you might be thinking you have in your head that this is perfect, but in reality, an experienced investor in the industry might already know this is never gonna work.
Now that you said it, I remember a book. I think it's called How to Think Like an Investor.
Yeah.
So like put yourself in investor shoes, like that. So search about that. That book actually teaches some techniques. But one that I really like is instead of approaching investors for them to invest in you, is to kind of like approach them for advice, right? And then kind of involve them into the process. Once they give their opinion about the project, they get involved, and then up at one point you can pitch your idea. So we can create connections.
Yes, because that way they're already invested in other type of resources in their mental way. They're already invested in the idea. They're already thinking, what can I do about this company? And if I was involved, I would do this, and this. So yeah, when you go and you actually give them this opportunity to put their money in, they're more likely to do so.
And they already know about it.
Yeah.
They already studied it with you as an advice. So yeah, this is a very good way that worked before in our case as well. There is a common fear that I hear every time, especially at the stage of fundraising or sharing ideas, and the fear is sharing the actual idea. They think a lot of very early stage founders feel like if they share their ideas, people will steal it, right? What advice do you have for that?
Yeah, this is quite a big problem for us as well, because as a crowdfunding platform, we open up these ideas to everybody. Literally anybody on the internet can go and see your idea, your projections, your business plan, and all that. And a lot of startups are worried of this. But in my eyes, this is a huge misconception, because if somebody can see your idea right now, that you're at this stage of fundraising, maybe it's not even your first round, second round, or whatever, and they can steal this idea and do better than you with a 2-3 years a late start, and they can overtake you, then you probably are doing something really wrong, or you were not the right team to do this in the first place. And yeah, the idea is also great. Sometimes it's hard to find the proper idea, but the execution, I would say, is the harder part of the two.
Another thing is, people start with this idea, but once they execute it, that whole thing just changes.
Yeah, it can pivot in many ways. So the idea is not usually enough to ruin your startup if somebody steals the idea.
Okay. So let's talk about the current financial situation with some difficulties and challenges that we have in the current market. Do you think it's a good time for startups to raise money?
It's not the best time, for sure. But also, if you manage to do it now, it showcases that you have a very good business model, you have a good traction already, you have a good team that investors believe. So we're not at this stage that if you have a great idea and nobody will invest because the market is bad. It's just that investors are a bit more picky, which in some ways might be good.
I see. Are you guys worried about the current financial market? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but in every downfall, there's opportunities.
Yeah, that's also the case. I think who was fundraising right now? I think one of the VCI, Kinesis Venture, I think they're fundraising some more money right now. So if they can manage to do that, then they have the dry powder to invest in more startups. They see a lot of more opportunities on their end to do so.
Mm-hmm. And are they fundraising for themselves?
Yeah, for the fund. I think they're raising 3 to 5 million from existing and new investors. So they must see opportunities out there, maybe better valuations for them to get in the better price. But at the same time means that there is appetite in the market.
It is. I think personally, this market right now is perfect for entrepreneurs at your early stage, because it's very risky to start anyway. But if you're early stage, then it's less financial risk. So you can play around in this market, and there's a lot of people that gave up. So you can just take their place or approach their businesses in a different way and innovate. It's perfect time in my opinion. Fundraising, tough, yeah, but to start ideas, very. So what are some alternative options? Private investors, one.
Crowdfunding, another one.
This one. What are other options that founders can use to raise funds?
Maybe you should look at it on the other end of the spectrum. Instead of raising funds, you can cut back a bit on spending, some of the luxuries, some of the not necessary expenses of the business, in order to extend your runway for a few more months, maybe a year, in order to be able to fundraise in a better environment instead. So that's another option. Other than that, there's always a lot of grants from the government here in Cyprus, although they can be kind of bureaucratic and can take a long time to get, but that's also a good option.
Tell us about the next year's 30 million startup fund coming from the Europe.
Yeah, so that's, for those that don't know, that's the equity fund here in Cyprus that they were trying to set up back from 2020. It kind of fell apart. They gave the tender to the European Investment Fund to manage the whole process. And from my knowledge, there's 2 finalists right now. I don't think they picked the last one, who will manage this fund along with their own investors. It's a big step. It's a good step. But of course, that's not going to be the solution to all our problems. 30 million can be, it's a significant value for the Cypriot ecosystem, but definitely not enough for everything we're trying to do. I see it as a good way to get people involved and co-finance some of the initiatives, which is why we're also excited about it. We don't see it as competition. We rather see it as fuel to the growth of the ecosystem.
You will get more founders because they want to utilize and they look at other options.
Yeah, and this is very similar to what happened in Greece in 2013, I think, that they started the first funds from European money. And now they're in their second or third funding round. So you have this compounding effect of money coming in, new startups growing, some succeeding, some failing, of course, and then going on again and again, these entrepreneurs creating new projects, creating new ideas, people getting involved in this ecosystem, and then it spreads out and it compounds. So we are still, I think, in our second cycle, I want to say, but this is really going to help.
I think it's very good timing, because we had a little spike of startups back in 2014, 2016, but we were nowhere ready for any of these kind of funds. So do you know about the details of the fund, or is this needs to come out first? Do you know when is it going to get started? Maybe the requirements?
Yeah, the details are public because the process of who was going to get the management was public. From what I remember, they need to, out of the 30 million, the provider who's going to manage the fund needs to put in at least a third of their own money. So that's quite significant. They're going to have quite a bit skin in the game. The requirements, that's up to the management again. So in my opinion, because the market is so small, they shouldn't restrict it to anybody. So they shouldn't be sector specific or stage specific. We need it everywhere. In terms of tickets, I think it's going to be 250,000 over 3 years. So 250, total of up to 750,000 funding per project. So they get the whole, maximum from my understanding of the tender. And then the competition is supposed to finish by the end of the year. So we should be hearing early after the holidays, who's going to actually manage this, what's going to be their strategy, and how you can approach them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So they will actually create the requirements and the program.
Yeah, so it was part of the selection process to outline what's going to be your strategy of investing this money. And from my understanding, it's just going to be one. So yeah.
I hope that is a little bit better than the previous one, because if this grant from the European Union gets spent on actual innovative or actual startups, perfect. Because the last ones, like, they were companies that
you mean
never be classified as a startup.
You mean the grants?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them because, firstly, the process of actually getting the grants is counterproductive. So it doesn't make sense for a startup to spend too much time on it, and there's all these requirements. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's also that companies that rely too much on grants to survive and grow, then you once you run out of that funding, you can't survive in the market. You get too much, reliant on free money, essentially.
Yeah, and it's like it's money without the consequences.
Yes.
You spend it without
there is no equity. You don't lose anything.
So I put the next question up. The question is actually a word cloud, so it's a free text. Just answer with a word. I'll get to you now. The question is, how do you feel when you think about funding? So just put one word. How do you feel? Yes.
About the last one, funding from the government, someone from the Union, etc. The requirements that are being set usually to get into those funds. First of all, we're talking about 30 to 40% investment from the startup itself, which is not feasible. We're talking about a young startup. Yeah. Secondly, the first part of the funding that comes in comes usually after 50% of the work done. So it's not actually 40% of your own money. You have to put at least 60% of your own money. So you get the job done, and then they will check, they will evaluate what you've done, and they might even not give you the money. And for a young startup that goes forward with cutting up expenses, as you said, and we know what expenses, like among my head startup, etc. We're talking small startups. And for the first one, I had to sell my bike, my car, give up my flat, and so on. And I managed to make like 10,000 for I ended up getting no funding, and after COVID, it's like I lost everything. It went well for a couple of years, but being kind of mature on small startups and services, it's for a small company, it's not feasible to get your hands on that.
Are they going to put that requirement for the?
No, so the good thing now with the venture capital fund is going to be a proper fund. So they're going to give you the money up front. They're going to take a stake in the company. It's going to work like a proper investment. Yeah, this mentality of actually, they even require you to show them that you already have the money, which is quite crazy if you had the money. That's the point of the grant. But yeah, it's clearly made by people that have not even business experience, I would say, let alone startup experience.
Suspicious attitude.
Yeah,
it's just like, okay, we need to like make sure that they're not cheating us.
Yeah, exactly. So we are being a bit overcautious in that front in order nobody to get blamed that if something goes sour.
Yeah. Okay. So don't forget about the Slido. Answer with one word, and and then we'll see that afterwards.
I suspect that the word a lot of people are gonna say is anxious, pressured.
You'll be surprised.
Yeah.
I thought about that too, but
Because it's a stressful process of fundraising and chasing investors, trying to convince them that you're doing something right, and at least that's my perspective on it.
I say it opposite. I say
Yeah,
like,
that's good. That's good.
it's a fun activity.
Okay, that's great. That's good to hear.
Because it's all about it. It does matter with numbers and finances, but at the end of the day, it's human relationship.
It is. It is.
It's all about communication, human relationship, and negotiation, right? And this is what I like to do. Like that's how we see running these events, because it's a lot of interaction, a lot of discussions, and So, as we saw on Slido, there's some words. We've got pressure, distracting, intimidating, pessimistic, and opportunity.
Yeah.
So
I can agree with a few of those. Distracting in that sometimes it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and sometimes founders get too caught up in it, and kind of you sideline the actual business in order to get the money. So you need to balance both.
This actually happened in my second startup. We raised fund, 50 or 60 grand, and we start spending it. But when the money was running out, the distraction wasn't about fundraising. The distraction was about dealing with the investor, right? So when the money was running out and we needed more in the capital injection, and we had to pause all the operations just to deal with the investors' needs, and it killed the idea, killed the startup at that point. Right. Let's talk about crowdfunding in Cyprus. So I already asked you this question about, why did you decide Crowdbase? You answered in a way that the opportunity was out there, the regulations was there already, so you just jumped in and you took advantage of it. And what was the process that you had with the government to get this started? Because I know that you worked.
So like the license we're talking about is actually being regulated by the Cyprus Securities and Exchange Commission. We are a proper investment firm right now. And it was a lengthy process of actually mimicking a proper investment firm, all the procedures they need to do, all the safeguards they need to have. And it pretty much boils down to about 500 pages of procedures and requirements that you need to follow in order to execute your business. So it was a long process because we were the first one to do it, and we worked very closely with the regulator of how this was going to be implemented in reality. It was a lot of back and forth. It took us about 13 months to do so, which was a lengthy process, but it was kind of lengthy process. It kept us back a little bit from our timeline, but
Were they positive that it would get done? Or you were kind of unsure?
No, I was positive that it was going to get done one way or another, because we were very determined. We kept pushing them, and we, even though they were challenging us in many ways, we had I want to say the right answer, the right people that were helping us in order to get the license. And I'm sure they knew themselves that this was going to be something very useful for the market and something that had a lot of impact. So they were
had to use
it. So they made this whole regulation and nobody had picked it up yet. So I think they were also hoping that somebody would do it.
And how can a startup apply in a program to get crowdfunding?
We're very open in that way that there's a form you can fill up on the website. You can reach out to anybody in the team usually, and just begin a conversation that usually starts by, tell us a bit about what do you do? Where are you right now? What have you achieved? Do you have a business plan? Do you have some financial projections we can look at, and yeah, getting to know each other.
And what are the requirements? Because you were talking about getting to have a public company. What are the startup reform to be able to participate?
So there are no hard requirements on our end that we want this type. Sorry, wants to that we want this type of businesses at this stage. No, we are open to any innovative idea that excites us and that we think that's going to be a good investment opportunity for the investors. But on the side of regulation, what this new framework dictates is that companies, firstly, the investors need to own the shares in the actual company. So there shouldn't be any middlemen between the company and the investor. No SPVs, special purpose vehicle, or any companies in between. And the other requirement is that investors should be able to do whatever they want with their shares. There shouldn't be what they call preemption rights. So if you want to sell if I have some shares I got from crowdfunding, I should be able to sell them to you at whatever price I want, whenever I want, without having to, ask permission from the company. And that essentially means that the company needs to be converted from a limited liability company to a public. Yeah.
I see. And what is the procedure to invest in these startups as an individual?
So if you mean through our platform, so it works very much like an online brokerage, if I can say that. You can open up an account like you do for Revolut, fully online with just a utility bill and your ID. And then it's just a matter of clicking invest and then company you want. You can pay by debit card or you can pay by bank transfer, and that's it. If the campaign is successful, then you'll get your shares.
So it's after the campaign.
Yeah. So once the campaign is over, then we pull all the money together. We summarize, how much shares each investor will get depending on their investment, and then the company issues these shares to the investors directly.
What if the campaign is not successful? What if the goal is not reached?
Yeah, if the goal is not reached, then all the money are returned back to the investors with no penalties or anything, and they can use that money to, whatever, invest in maybe another campaign. Yeah.
Okay. So what is the main difference between the Cypriot crowdfunding regulation and the United States ones? I think is within the Jobs Act that they have. What are some, not all of it, but what are the highlight differences of the two countries?
I think it just boils down to investor protection, and that's just in general with the US versus European regulations. In the US, things are very much open. You can pretty much buy, invest, sell whatever you want, and there are no restrictions there. But in the EU, it's been a bit more controlling in order to safekeep the day-to-day investor, which in my opinion is good. It's important to be transparent, show the proper warnings and the proper information to these investors, which is something that they don't have to do in the US. Some platforms do it, which is good, but yeah, in general, they don't have to.
And through both your platform and general regulation in Cyprus, is it only startups that can participate in the platform, or is it any type of business?
Yeah, so any type of business can participate. For our platform, what we want to do is promote these innovative companies. So we don't want a very, cut and dry business. I don't even know, like a kiosk. Yes, we don't want another coffee shop. We have already so many of them. So we want to promote innovation. And from my perspective of the European Union's direction to crowdfunding, they want to apply this framework to small and medium-sized companies. So it's going to be like a pre-IPO financing for a lot of these companies.
Okay. And how were the results so far?
Yeah, so
you have three companies?
Yeah, so we have three in the two live, one completed, one live right now, and one coming up early next year, I want to say. So the first one was really successful. Easy Boat by Stelios Hadjiano. This newest venture, which is essentially Skyscanner for holiday yacht chartering. So that went really well. They beat their target and they raised 470,000, which was 180% of the target. And yeah, people are gonna get their shares in the company very soon, starting next week. We have another campaign running right now, which is a debt campaign. For that one, you essentially lend to a company and you get regular payments in return. On that one, the market, they haven't responded as much as they expect. So, yeah, so that's perhaps a learning experience for us, that the people might not be as excited for low-end stable investments. They want that high risk. They want that stake in the business in order to feel it as if it's theirs. Yeah, and then we have another startup starting in early next year, which is Snap, which is going to be wellness and health beauty appointments. So you can book your barbershop, your haircut, your salon, and all that stuff here in Cyprus.
Are they operational already?
No, they're going to start with the crowdfunding campaign. So it's going to.
Is that the one from Idea, or is it?
No, it's not from Idea. It's from a team of successful entrepreneurs that have, if you probably know them, Base Element, which is another marketing agency, and they have done other startups in the past. They have these side businesses. So yeah, they are doing that, and we're also looking perhaps into a real estate crowdfunding, are also starting next year, which again something exciting for a lot of people, because more people understand real estate. They understand how it works, and you normally would need an investment of 100,000, 200,000 in order to have an apartment, lend it out, and get your rents, for example. But now you'll be able to invest in a real estate project from a much smaller amount, like 500 euros.
Yeah. And what future do you see for Crowdbase? And also, do you see any competitors showing up anytime soon?
Yeah, so in Cyprus, I don't see any competitors. We're a small market, so unfortunately, I don't think we can handle a lot more platforms. We want to expand in Greece and Eastern Europe quite quickly, but there is already a few other players that want to do that. On the west side of things, there's big platforms from the UK, Seeders and Crowdcube, that they are slowly crawling their way through Western Europe. So we're not gonna disturb them. We're gonna start from the east and go up.
Yeah, and also it's after Brexit, so it's more.
Yeah, there's that difference.
To invest in the EU.
Yeah, exactly. So what we want to achieve at the end of the day is a pan-European crowdfunding platform.
Cool. So, Slido again. Question is, have you invested in a crowdfunding company before? Maybe through Kickstarter, American ones, British ones. Let's do that. And the last question is results. I think it was the same as, yeah.
Well, I do see a few of our investors here, so I know there is at least a few.
So, any questions so far? We're gonna have.
What about limited liability prices or non, the ones with no shares?
Sorry, say that again.
Companies that have no shares, limited liability,
Yeah.
or non-profits.
Unfortunately, due to the regulation, those cannot be supported from investment crowdfunding. So it wouldn't be an investment if they don't have a share or you don't get a proper monetary benefit out of them. If it's a non-profit, then you're probably looking for donation crowdfunding, which you have platforms like GoFundMe and all those stuff which are not restricted in one country. I think what sets us apart in Cyprus, because we do this regulated activity that basically only we can do right now in Cyprus.
Can you include crypto projects? Or that's
a great question. That's a gray area, because you mean like initial coin offerings?
like an innovative startup that is tackling a crypto blockchain?
Yeah, so that we can do. So if you get shares in a company that just develops on blockchain or does a crypto project, that we can do. The other question is whether we want to do.
That's part of your screening.
Yeah, that's part of our screening, to be honest. And but yeah, that we can do. Initial coin offerings that we cannot do because they don't fall again under this regulation.
Okay, perfect. So the next and last part that we're gonna talk about is about actually investing in startups. So more for investors, maybe it's good to gather some co-investors. So more maybe for your future, to look into startup investment, or maybe right now.
Yeah,
that's the thing. So it's really the first thing that comes in my mind when I think about startup investors in Cyprus is bad evaluations, right? Like when you have a startup, when you go to the market, you get deals that are ridiculous. Like you get like 40% for 10K or 50% for 15K. These kind of ridiculous evaluations. It relates back to the same question I asked you from the other side, the founders putting a value on startups. Now let's turn that into a way of how would you give a startup an offer? Yeah.
So as an investor, and I guess that's our role as Crowdbase in this intermediation, we do kind of the heavy work and the heavy lifting in order to make sure that the valuation of the startup is fair for the investor. For us, at the end of the day, what it boils down to is the traditional discounted cash flow model that you can do with other companies. There are a lot of founders and people in the venture capital and entrepreneur industry. They want to say that, oh, valuation is very subjective and you can get this and you can get that. But at the end of the day, I believe that it all boils down to numbers, and there is methodologies and there is academic papers that showcase how you can do that in a proper and consistent way. So that's what we're trying to do in order to root this valuation in realism and based on facts. We say, okay, this technology that can be valued is the first of its kind, and so it's worth millions. And that's kind of hard to evaluate. Yeah.
So one thing that you mentioned previously was that the team is one of the biggest factors. What other questions would you ask the startup to get a better idea of their positioning?
Yeah, you can ask if they have a track record. That usually needs to be linked to the future. So if you're seeing a customer acquisition cost of 50 euros and then you're projecting that it's going to be 10, then that doesn't make sense. Or if you don't explain how you're going to do that jump, how is that going to change? So that's a big example. The other thing is their understanding of the market they are working on right now, how they're going to expand to new markets, if that's a big part of their strategy. What else? Some technical questions are usually good if it's a tech company, but nowadays all of them are tech companies. Yeah, it has some way of being tech. Their background of the team, their experiences, why they are the right people to do this.
And for the investors, when they invest in startups, one way to make money is out of the investment is if the startup has an exit, they can get a big chunk. One way is dividends. What are some other ways that they can make money out of startup investments?
Yeah, it can also the company can also go public. Here in Cyprus, that's quite hard. Again, our public market is not at its best stage right now. Sometimes startups are willing to buy back their shares, or there is a clause in the investment that they're going to buy back their shares at a premium in a few years or at a certain event.
Can you refinance your shares in the company and get, I don't know, a loan out of that as a security, or that's not possible?
That's very rare, I would say. Usually in a future funding round, if there's some investors that want to come in and they don't want to be dilute too much, then they can buy out some of the other shareholders. Yeah, if they're willing. There are a few things. They can be very creative, but it's important to highlight that actually getting a return out of a startup is usually quite hard. It takes time, and most startups fail.
Yeah. So why should an investor invest in startups rather than stocks or forex or real estate or et cetera?
Mm-hmm.
What is catchy about startups?
Yeah, so I think it's just the excitement of the journey. It's something usually, especially with crowdfunding, an idea can resonate with you personally for whatever reason. It might be part of your career or something that you feel passionately about, and the potential upside. So in the long run, you should make more money through high risk investments than low risk ones.
Yeah. Is there like a specific demographic of an investor that should not invest in startups?
Yes.
Who should not invest in startups?
Yes. So probably people close to retirement that have the money that they need the money to live off. So when you're investing in general, you should probably assume that you should be able to live without that money. And when we are talking about startups, then that's even more important. It's even more risky, so it's even more likely that you're going to lose that money. So if you can lose that money, 100% of it, then you shouldn't invest in a startup.
And what do you think the average time frame and expected return on revenue is with these investments?
Yeah, I would say minimum 5 years. Some of them can be lucky and have a good return at 3. I would say about 5 years. And then if things go more or less according to the business plan, you can be looking at 4 to 5 times return on your investment.
And like when we look at countries like Israel, they have a very bright culture around startup investments, and the investors are well educated. There's culture, and it's not demonized. But we're growing that in Cyprus. So how can we speed this up? How can we build this culture in Cyprus of investing, not only startups, but investing in opportunities, either in a longer time frame or a riskier situation?
Yeah, I think this kind of boils down to financial literacy. People need to understand first how investing works in general, from pension funds to life insurance to index funds and all that. For example, investing in order to have a house, to get a car and all that. And then you need to understand this segment of investing in highly risky, innovative businesses that might work or might not work. It doesn't, if a startup fails, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a scam, for example. It just might, something didn't work out, the business wasn't as good as was expected, or the numbers were there, the demand from the market. So in many ways in Cyprus, because we have been burnt in the past with the market crisis in 2000, 2008, 2013, a lot of people have demonized this idea of investing, and they have completely decided to completely sideline it. It's a problem.
We need some success stories.
Yes, that would be useful.
And my last question here is, what are some, let's say, trending industries to invest in? Say for the next 3 years.
3 years. I would say food tech. I like ed tech. Fintech, I think it's kind of peaked already, so it's going to be hard to get in there, especially on regulated activities. I would strongly advise against that. It's a lot of hassle. So I like those two industries. Yeah, those two I think are really useful, and they can have a huge impact. I don't want to say energy because, again, that's a bit overcrowded at the moment. So it's hard to get in there. I would just say, in my opinion, I like businesses that are easy to scale, and so businesses that like recurring SaaS businesses, for example, You can subscription-based businesses that you can just open it up to anybody in the world, and if the service works for them, they can get it. So you automatically have such a big market.
What about the sustainability?
Again, that's it's a hard one. We want to promote sustainability. It's just that you have a lot of greenwashing nowadays. Businesses say that we have these amazing targets, 0 emission by 2050, and they set these very ambitious targets, but they slowly sweep it under the rug a few years afterwards without anybody noticing. So you have to be very cautious on that. Yeah.
Okay. So Slido. The question is, put yourself as an investor, what would be the biggest challenge when thinking about investing in a high-risk, high-potential startup? And it's a word cloud. And let's see the results soon. So that's all I had in my mind. It's I think we bounced around a lot of valuable information here, and I would love to get to know people here that attended.